This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Of Africa, bordered by Sierra Leone, Guinea, Cote d'Ivoire, and the Atlantic Ocean. Capital Monrovia, which is named after a U.S. president, former President John Monroe. So when you hear Monrovia, just know there is a linkage with the United States. But let's go to the proverb: you cannot climb two trees at the same time. You cannot climb two trees at the same time. How would you interpret that?
I would interpret that to, and actually would juxtapose it against another proverb in my places where I come from, loosely translated to that when a hyena is looking for something to eat, you'll find, and there's a good smell of meat this side, another good smell of this side, and it doesn't want to lose either. So my grandmother used to tell me, when you smell two good things and you want to follow the two of them, at the end of the day, like a hyena, you'll split. Mm-hmm. So it's the same thing. You cannot climb two trees at the same time. You got to decide. You got to count your costs and decide which one you're going to go for. Otherwise, you lose the two.
Yeah.
There's actually a Swahili, I think it's a Swahili equivalent, something, Panda Farasu Pasukam Samba.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I know it.
So what is Msamba?
What is Msamba?
What?
That's where she draws the line of knowledge.
Msamba is pelvic bone.
Like you will break
into two.
Yeah. If you ride two horses.
You ride two horses.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Msamba.
Okay.
Msamba.
Now I learn something new every day.
Yeah.
Today you've learned Manyunyu.
Yes.
And
And Msamba. Trying to see how I can use this both in a sentence. Might take a
Msamba
while.
and Manyunyu.
Yeah.
I was going to give you a sentence.
Of course you
A
were.
simple one.
You work on that, and we'll talk about it later. All right. So 14th of October came and went, and IPA remained strong, and the prices remained stable. So we didn't see a drop in fuel prices, which we were hoping for, and neither did we see an increase in prices that we were hoping against. What we saw is that things have remained stable. So what you were buying fuel for over the last 30 days is essentially what you're going to continue buying for at least the next 30 days. What would then have, affected that for it to remain the same?
Basically, what affects these prices in most cases is the trade activities in the international market, and we've not had a lot of issues in the international market lately. The prices have been fairly stable, and that's the reason. Actually, there was supposed to be a slight increase in in diesel and kerosene. Minimal or no change whatsoever in super, but that is usually caused by other independent variables. In trade there are those things that are maybe premiums and freights and such when they oscillate. But the prices remained the same because EPRA decided to use the Petroleum Development Fund to cushion on that slight change that would have been there. Okay. So basically, because we've not had a lot of upheavals in the international market, or statements that would affect fuel prices across the globe, that's the reason why we have remained the same. We expected it, and we're still expecting the same to be in the next month, unless something happens drastically in between now and then.
But the fund, the Fuel Development Fund,
yeah,
it comes from money that when we pay for fuel, that there's a percentage that goes to that fund.
5 shillings and 40 cents.
5 shillings and 40 cents.
Yes.
On the total amount.
Yes.
However, so what you're saying essentially is that we then have kept fuel prices low.
Yes.
The money that we pay on tax is essentially what has gone back into making sure that, okay, we've taken this money and we're able to settle it so we don't have to increase prices.
Yes.
If not for that fund, which we pay taxes on, then we would have seen an increase in fuel prices.
Yes.
So it's us.
It's us actually, and my prayer and my wish is that as the petroleum industry develops in the country, we get to a place where we can make that fund robust enough so that we can actually do real cushioning of the Kenyans in times of adversity, because the purpose of that fund is supposed to cushion the economy, basically not even you, the economy, from upheavals whenever there are issues of global supply hitches.
And does it?
Remember the last time I was here, I was talking about us having things like strategic reserves that would be probably built inland in our special economic zones for the same purposes.
Right.
Because today, as I say, I've very many days say this, we do not run an industry of petroleum. We do actually run logistics. Like we just deliver fuel from here, point A to point B. So whenever the supply side has a hitch, the direct person, the common man gets the shock. And so we need to create those buffer zones where we can literally cushion, because you'll find that most of the times these upheavals that happens across the country, across the globe, sometimes they are short-lived. But those effects comes and lives with us because of the traders, of course, they hedge. It's like any other business. And so, like today, if there's a policy direction by the government, you'll find that it will affect the way shares are trading everywhere. It's the same thing. Whenever there's an issue that happens across, probably, and especially in the Middle East, then we are affected. So for me, my prayer and my wish for as the development of the industry continues to grow is that we could make this fund robust in a way that it's able to cushion. Because today the 5 shillings and 40 cents is not a lot of money. And I know there's a balancing act that has to be done, because it cannot be just added, because it will also add into the cost of the fuel. But there has to be either the government finds a way of making sure that it is made robust enough to make sure that whenever there are those upheavals across there, and they are happening because of the ever-changing geopolitical tensions, and especially in the Middle East. So we cannot bury our hands in the sand and think that it will always be like this. We'll wake up tomorrow. Yes, Trump the other day went, and there are no issues today in Israel and Gaza. Iran is quiet, so we don't have the issues at the Strait of Hormuz. But this is not something that we can bank on and say that it's always going to be like that. So we can wake up tomorrow and there's an issue. So what happens?
Chomba, one would ask, so with the Kenyans now paying for fuel prices to be stable, there is also the other argument that Kenya went G2G. Did that play any role for us to find ourselves where we are today?
Yeah, G2G, there are things I like appreciating, and I usually say mugala muwe na haki yake umpe. G2G for me, at the time where we were then, it was a masterstroke. If you remember 2022, there's a time we woke up in the morning and there was no fuel anywhere because the procurement was left to the market, as it were. And it happened that because of the price control, most of these companies were not finding it feasible to get fuel from outside and come and sell at the prices that were recommended. So, and then it also saw a lot of inflation. The Kenya shilling really lost against the dollar, because every morning we were looking for, in a month, Kenya uses about $500 million in fuel procurement, give or take. So every morning we were looking for these dollars, and so it's created a very bad market for the dollars, and they were escalating every day. So the arrangement for G2G did more than just fuel. It stabilized the dollar prices. If you realize now, we've been stable for quite a while, and that's why I say that is a plus. That is something I would always want to give it to the people that thought about the G2G. However, every good thing has its other side, and I usually say the best thing is when you compare likes for likes. If you want to know whether the G2G is good or not, just ask yourself, if we did not have the G2G, what would be happening to the dollar? Chances are the dollar would be trading right now upwards of 160 shillings. What would that do to the people importing products using the same dollar? So it would be a bad thing for the economy in the long run. So for me, I still feel up until we find a way of making sure that our currency is stabilized, G2G is playing a good role for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question about these strategic reserves, where then the government will cushion its people against international shocks when the country then has its own stockpiles. What is stopping us from having that? I'm just looking at some statistics here. For example, South Africa has a strategic fuel reserve mechanism. They call it the Strategic Fuel Fund, SFF. Nigeria has reserves. Tanzania, it's under development. I hear they're still planning. Botswana has a modest one that acts as a buffer. What is stopping Kenya from having one?
Thank you for that question. That question is a bit technical in the answer, but I try to answer it in a way that is palatable. So in development studies, we talk about policy philosophies. And the way we trade in our fuel, today, the way we look at the fuel trade in this country, we don't look at from a policy side where we talk about development-sided policy, like an enabler. We look at it from a revenue earner. So whenever you look at petroleum as a revenue earner, what you care about is the revenue that comes through the sales of petroleum. But when you look at it from the philosophy of it is an enabler, an economic enabler, then you start now thinking about how can I make it stable, how can I make it cheaper or through. So our policy will have to change. Our policy philosophy about petroleum will have to change for us to find sense in making the buffer zones. Because the minute we look at it, we look at petroleum from the point that we want it to be an enabler. So it has to be cheap so that we can reduce costs on transport and a cost on production. Then that will expand the economy, because a lot of people will get involved in the economic activities because the prices of energy and transportation are cheaper. Then we draw more taxes. In my view, we draw more taxes from those emerging businesses that have been enabled by cheaper cost of petroleum and transport. Then that, when we think like that, the only thing that will make sense is for us to have buffer zones and have those strategic reserves so that we can always maintain low prices of petroleum throughout the year.
So in all this, because if then we're looking at petrol and petroleum products as a tax or a revenue, just earning revenue and collecting tax, and you've just said that if then you bring it, you make it cheap, you're expanding the economy.
Yes.
Transport expands.
Yes.
People in the manufacturing industry, they
Yes.
expand. Then you're expanding the economy. Therefore, you're collecting more taxes.
Yes.
There are people who sit in an office and they're not thinking like this.
You see, it's this is something that I don't know when we shall get there, but I am convinced today, and I've said this time and again, that the government is not an employer world over. The biggest provider of employment in the world is the private sector. And private sector is also the biggest contributor to the exchequer through taxes for any government in the world. So for me, the simple way of expanding an economy is just making sure that we have as many people doing businesses as possible. Take, for instance, today we have about 7-point-something million SMEs, people who are doing businesses in Kenya. And we are looking to do employment. We are looking to employ young people. If you can enable those small businesses today in a way that they will employ, each of those businesses employ 2 people. How many people do we employ at a go? There's about 14 million people. By just making sure that the SMEs we have today are enabled through lower cost of production, cheap and affordable cost of credit, basic things that will make these SMEs grow. Let me give you an example. When 2002, after the inauguration of the NAC government, I didn't know very many things about the economy, and so I was doing some petroleum selling uko Kangemi. But there's something I got to know. All of a sudden, where we were selling that kerosene, we started seeing ladies coming with some dances coming from banks, contracted by banks, to come and do some gigs and encourage people to come and register for loans. I don't know whether you remember that.
Road shows.
Yeah, road shows everywhere. what happened? You see, it was just made that the government did not stopped borrowing heavily. I came to realize later that the government stopped to compete with Mwananchi borrowing from commercial banks. And so the banks did not have anywhere else to take money other than to look for ingenious ways to make sure that they lend to the common person. And that's how the economy grew up exponentially. That's how we grew up exponentially. My worry is, why wouldn't we look for ways and means to do the same today?
Well, it sounds like a no-brainer because everybody seems to be speaking the same language.
Yeah.
This is the fourth conversation that we've had in as many, in the last couple of weeks, whereby we looking at the importance of putting money in the hands of the private sector, and you do that by allowing them to borrow from domestic banks, because what you've done is that you're essentially building the economy by putting it in the hand of SMEs. It's a no-brainer. You've done it before, it's been figured out. Chairman of KRA was here. Eugene Wamala talked about the same thing. Bill Okero said the same thing. Now here you are also saying the same thing. It's a no-brainer. It begs the question then that why then would we not use those policy directives or change moving in that direction. Now, when we have that idea floating around in our heads, the Kenya Pipeline Company is being privatized. It's being sold, essentially. Please explain how, if not, then that works to sort out some of these things that you're talking about. Is the privatization of KPC, for example, going to lend to this conversation that we're having? Or does it look like something that might get us in a bit of a pickle?
From where I stand, I don't have any problem with the privatization of companies and state agencies. The problem of that is, or rather what makes the difference is, how do we do that? In whose hand do these public entities land when we privatize them? Because in other places we've seen privatization creating efficiency. But now the problem with me and the way I look at the other state agencies that we have privatized before, how efficient are they? You see, because it has to be a benchmark. We don't just do this thing for the sake of it. So for me, the biggest problem is actually privatization would create more efficiency, because the people that get there, they will demand better shareholding returns and all those kind of things. But now the problem becomes, in whose hand do these things land? That to me is the biggest question, and that begs a lot of questions going forward, because today if I am selling something and you don't have money to buy, because as the economy is right now, a lot of people are struggling, isn't it? And we are the people who are supposed to buy these shares and all these things. So who buys?
Chumba, let's look at privatization of KPC. KPC has been managed by government all through, right?
Yes.
And there's a time when KPC was a profit-making body.
Yes.
Isn't it still? Sorry.
Yeah.
So we look at a point when KPC was at its best and doing very well in the economy of the country. Now we're talking about privatizing it. And one would ask the question, why can't the government of Kenya just improve on how KPC is managed instead of selling it off? Is it that we've given up on this, let it go? Or can we do better and bring KPC to be that crown jewel that it once was?
I'll thank you for that question, and I'll answer it in giving some contrast. You see, today the biggest, we talk about world best practices. If you look at business, you don't want to keep reinventing the wheel. So today, if you look at the best world practice in terms of petroleum development and industries in the world, you look at the places like Abu Dhabi, you look at places like Malaysia, you look at companies like Qatar Energy and Petronas of this world, you realize that most of these industries are government-led. And because it's a strategic industry, the government's hands are there because it's something they don't want to play about. It's just the way you don't want to play about with security. So what they do in those is that they create efficiencies from the government side. because this is a strategic reserve. It's a strategic installation. They create efficiencies from the government side. So my worry is, today in Kenya we have National Oil Corporation. National Oil Corporation is supposed to be the strongest company in this country dealing with management of petroleum issues in the country. It's a government-owned entity. But the problem we have is institutional capacity. That even if today you bailed them out from where they are, you see the issues that we keep having with KQ every so often. We know this is a strategic installation and it must deliver. And in other countries, you look at the Ethiopian airline, it has delivered. You go to any major airport in the world, there's an Ethiopian airline flight going there. It's the same thing with petroleum. National Oil Corporation today are supposed to be the people managing these state agencies and coordination of Kenya Pipeline and all those state agencies to make sure that there is efficiency flow and value for the fuel. But now the problem is when we give it out to the private sector, we are profit driven, okay? And we will work towards profit at the expense of what? At the expense of national interest. So,
but I need you. I'm sorry. I need you to explain something to me. Kenya Pipeline Corporation has the responsibility to move oil from the port to other places where it is then dispensed, distributed, and then taken to different parts of the country. Yes. Petrol, kerosene, diesel, because then it has its different outlets. They came here, they told us how they operate, right? And so there is no other one. They are the sole pipeline company.
Yes.
Nobody uses another one to get this done. So, two things. Number one, they are managed by government. Number two, they are profitable. Usually, when we talk about privatization, we do that when there's a problem somewhere. Management issues, like in Nigeria, where we bungled the whole refinery thing, we couldn't do it, then we can't provide enough power across board. So private hands come in to manage the supply of power to certain parts of the country. Was there a problem with KPC? Was there a lack of management? Was there a lack of accountability? Was something wrong? Because I think that's where the question must be asked. Why are you privatizing something that didn't seem to have a problem and holds the monopoly for the introduction and distribution of oil products in Kenya? Why?
Yes, and I thank you for the question, because honestly, from where we sit as independent petroleum dealers outside here, we are not privy to any problems that are in Kenya Pipeline that necessitates it to change hands. Because as you rightly put it, you do some of these things to change. Like we say, you don't change a working formula. If it's working, you don't change it. And from where I sit and what I know is that Kenya Pipeline has been a profit-making company for the longest. Actually, I think it's among the few state agencies that have been making profit. So as to why it has to be privatized and for what reason? So for me, the question is, what you get from the privatization, what is it going to do? Because when you get to know what it's going to do, then you get to know the motivation behind the privatization. Yeah. So for me, in terms of efficiency of Kenya Pipeline, I don't have a problem. It has run the industry in a very efficient manner. We have not had issues. Actually, even the times we have ever had issues of petroleum in the country, it has never been the fault of Kenya Pipeline. It has always been the fault of either supply, the fuel coming, or other price issues, but never the issue of Kenya Pipeline. So as to why it is being privatized, I think if we got to know where the money that is privatizing it is going, then we get to know the motive of privatization.
Well, those who have been in support of this, and especially coming from the government side, have, among other things, before I ask my question, said, okay, look, if we privatize KPC, one, we're going to raise revenue. So this, in turn, then will reduce borrowing, the borrowing burden that we have as a country. And so the privatization then will help fund the 2025, the the current budget and next year's budget. But also Kenya is under pressure from high debt servicing costs. So selling it then would essentially mean that they are selling a state asset that is going to generate lots of money. Then there is the point of unlocking value. The improvement of efficiency, like you had said earlier, and modernizing the corporate governance. So one of the arguments is that, okay, so if we privatize this, it's going to happen is we're going to have accountability, efficiency, management, innovation, and performance, and especially if we list it in the NSE. So that's the argument that we...
Dennis, in simple economics,
yes.
I'm not an economist, but I'm a student of development studies at the PhD level. If we are selling Kenya Pipeline, you see, you cannot, if you sell your assets and consume, you are not developing. If you sell your assets and improve on what you have, then you are developing. So for me, if we were selling Kenya Pipeline, if we are privatizing Kenya Pipeline today to develop the Lokicha Lamu Kenya Pipeline, the other pipeline, then that to me would be development, because you are improving. And you are creating more value, and that other pipeline now will bring in more. Those are the things. If we are selling Kenya Pipeline right now to make sure that we use that money to do strategic reserves I was talking about, then I would find it palatable. But if we are selling to raise revenue, to fund a budget, that is consumption, isn't it? And then what happens now? This year we sell Kenya Pipeline to fund the budget of 2026 or whatever. Then what do we sell next year? How do we fund that other budget? So to me, those are the contradictions. So if we were selling the Kenya Pipeline, privatization of the Kenya Pipeline to fund another pipeline, maybe to take care of the Turkana and all that fuel to Mombasa and Lamu, then I would have no problem.
Well, the banks that have been mentioned as underwriters, JP Morgan, for example, it's not clear. It's just names that have been thrown out there. I want to understand and explain this to us, because you earlier talked about privatization is not really bad, but it depends on whose hands are you privatizing this.
Yes.
So let's look at the good, the bad, and the ugly. So if this falls into, let's start with the bad and ugly. If this falls into bad hands,
Yes.
how does the common Mwananchi get affected? What does this mean, and what does it translate to?
If it gets to the bad, then you realize that you see the purposes of having these state agencies is basically what we call protectionism measures, where the government now takes care of a certain industry to protect itself and the citizens from things that
external influence.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So if that is not happening, and it is in bad hands, and we all know that private sector is profit oriented. So because private sector does not exist to create efficiency. Efficiency is a byproduct of what they are looking for. They are looking for profit, and they know if we improve on efficiency, we'll make more profit. So they did not come to create efficiency. They came to make profit, whichever way that comes.
So does that mean the cost of fuel for me who's going to the pump, I want my kerosene, I want my diesel or petrol, the price will go up?
You see, there is here, you see, today the government can decide to subsidize the costs of Kenya Pipeline to take care of its Wananchi. When Kenya Pipeline is in the hands of private sector, will they subsidize in case there is something that requires an additional funding to Kenya Pipeline? No. They will just increase the cost to make sure that it is taken care of, because private sector is looking for profit.
So that is one. So that is one. So they may because they're led by profits.
Yes.
So they will decide, okay, next month by 15th, let's increase the price of petrol by 5
shareholders
shillings.
Want this X amount.
Yeah, the shareholders control. They want this X amount, but then they will be like, okay, how do we get this X amount? So then let's increase diesel by 5 shillings. Let's increase petrol by 6 shillings. They can decide to do that.
Yeah,
and
because
nobody
they are
can
a
control.
monopoly. Yeah, they are a monopoly.
And nobody will control anything.
So who will control that now? Because
Okay.
unless the government now has the majority of shareholding in that Kenya Pipeline to veto that kind of a decision, and they will still have to find a way of making sure that they compensate the shareholders, then It becomes a zero-sum
And
game.
Chuma, at that point, right now we're talking about government has entered into a G2G deal that has helped us stabilize fuel price and even the dollar.
Yeah.
At the time when KPC has gone into privatization, can G2G deal at any point make sense or help the situation in the country? Because remember, the body that runs this oil business is a private company. Would G2G at that point even matter?
G2G, the only good thing about G2G, it applies up to where we bring in the product. So the arrangement of Kenya Pipeline is entirely different arrangement. Yeah. So G2G would, the benefits of G2G will still be up to Mombasa. Yeah. So we'll still have those benefits, as it were. In terms of the management of KPC, if the privatization was to happen and still benefits accrues to Mwananchi, in my view, I don't see how else it will happen unless still the government has a way of holding down the KPC. Because if that does not happen and it is entirely in the hands of private sector, then that would have a problem. And I wouldn't want to speak to that because I don't know, I'm not privy to the details of how the government will control the KPC going forward after privatization.
Is there I'm trying to look at the point where, okay, so the reason why we don't have these strategic reserves is also obviously because, one, as they're looking at it, it's a revenue earner.
Yes.
And I'm looking at some numbers here, some carrier reports on petroleum tax collections, up to 33 point, and can correct me if I'm wrong, 33.4 billion in one period, exceeding the target of 30 billion. So according to this report, well, the government now takes up 79 shillings in tax per litre.
Per litre, yeah.
Is it 79
almost
shillings?
80. Yeah,
Almost
79 thereabout.
So 80 shillings the government takes as tax.
That is petrol, super petrol,
Super
then
petrol,
60 something diesel.
60
Something diesel.
This is diesel. So if you're looking at then fuel tax, 26 billion in 6 months from petrol, diesel and kerosene. I don't know whether that figure is combined or that's just petrol
Combined,
or kerosene alone. So KRA then collects 119 billion from fuel levy.
No,
Just fuel
petroleum.
levy.
This is just
That's why the
levy.
prices don't go down this month.
This is just levy.
You see, like I said about the policy philosophy, petroleum in Kenya is a revenue earner. It's not an enabler. Until it will change that philosophy to make it an enabler of the economy, we are likely. There's a time I was talking about milking an already over-milked cow. From time immemorial, and I will not even fault this government because these taxes have been there all through. What happens is whenever there's need for revenue, what the easiest place everybody turns to is how much can we get from petroleum. And it is a fatigued industry in terms of taxation today. And I hope we can remain the way we are or go lower, such that no other taxes comes, because it is very unlikely that prices would go down if taxes keeps on going up. And we have seen places where tax philosophy, petroleum philosophy is different. It is an enabler. And most of these countries, any countries that have ever developed and has developed their petroleum industry.
Singapore actually did that.
Yeah. It is the philosophy is different. It is an enabler. It is not a revenue earner. So in Kenya, what we need to do is, and I will say this, and I hope it is hard, that the only way that we shall ever grow as an economy is by expanding the tax bracket, the tax base. Why? Because the industries that we have right now, we keep increasing our budget. We say today is 4 trillion. Tomorrow we say it's 5 trillion. But when we are increasing that budget, are we giving the number of the new people that have come, the new businesses that have come into the tax bracket? We don't have. So what are we doing? We are going to the same people. The same people we are taxing 3 trillion
To get more
2 years ago, now we are taxing them 4 trillion, then tomorrow we tax them 5 trillion without expanding that tax bracket. What does that do? That fatigues the taxpayer. So we must have a very deliberate effort to make sure it doesn't matter how much money we spend in making sure that we expand the tax bracket. And the only way to expand the tax bracket is to enable the private sector to grow. How do you do that? Kenya, we know, and we know ourselves. There are things you know yourselves. We thrive in these small businesses. So how can we create systems that net those small businesses into the tax bracket, but then again enable them to get affordable credit? There are things I talk about if we really want to expand this economy. One, we must get affordable credit. The other thing, we must have what we call predictable taxation regime, such that I don't see the necessity of having a tax bill every year. Other places in the world, when people are investing, they will tell you this, that 2, 3, 4, 5 years from today, the tax regime is still the same. And so an investor coming to invest in that country does not worry about taxes laws changing and disadvantaging them at the end of the day. So we must have that. And then we must incentivize production side of the economy. If we do that, the private sector, as I told you, the 7-point-something million SMEs today we have, they can take them less than 1 year to each employ 2 more people, and net will have employed 14 million people in this country, and those people will pay as you earn. They'll pay whatever else, and the government will still get more taxes. But unless we do that, any other stories we do, I don't see it getting anywhere.
We often talk about affordable credit, and of course this is linked directly to then what entrepreneurs are going to be able to do. SMEs, MSMEs, essentially are the backbone of any economy, and that's why there's such big attention being paid to them. I keep saying that some of the biggest companies that we look at in the world today, we speak of them as though they are government-owned. They're not.
They are not.
They are private-owned institutions that may have a government share percentage, but they are, by and large, private companies.
Correct.
Microsoft, Nike, Google, all of these started
Private.
in a garage somewhere. They did. And we talk about them as though they were creations of government projects. But what happened is that government in their jurisdictions created an environment through which they would then be able to thrive.
Exactly.
And then more and more mushroomed, and they were able to build on those. I mean, take your pick. Kellogg's, even this KFC that we shout about all the time. Privately owned organizations that essentially build an economy but are buffered by government. Now, when you talk about affordable credit, what do we say? It sounds really nice to say that thing. Affordable credit. Affordable. What is that?
Let me tell you. Let me give you an example.
I borrow a loan and then 2%.
Let me give you an
What is
example.
that? Yeah.
Today, and credit to the central bank, they have lowered the base lending rate, and now we are doing at maybe about 16 or so percent loans that we are getting 16 to 18%. But a few months ago, people were borrowing at a cost of about 20% to 23%. I'll put it to you. I've never been employed personally. And so in my life, I've been in the business world. And I'll tell you this today, that there is no business that you will do today with the cost of credit at 23%, make profit, pay your workers and pay your statutory obligations and make any headways. It is not possible. Affordable credit here, what it means is a rate that allows you to make profit and contribute to the national growth. How does affordable credit come? Very simple. Would the government stop competing with Kenyans to borrow at commercial banks?
From the domestic market.
Because the minute you see, if Undo today you went to the bank to borrow 100 million because you have an idea of you want to create a small industrial organization,
right?
And you have done your proposals and all that, and then when you are on the line queuing and explaining why you know the grilling that goes around, and then a government walks in and they want the same 100 million, who do you think would be given that money?
Government.
The government, without even blinking of an eye. So what happens to you? You are not, the next thing they will tell you, because now the money they were supposed to give you, imepungua, what they will do is to tell you, because of your risks, we raise your interest high. But if the government did not pick this money from these banks in the first instant, their appetite to give out the money will still be
High.
So that is the biggest issue that we have. We must moderate. I know the government will always borrow internally, but we must moderate how much money we borrow internally, and so that we can leave the rest and incentivize the banks to fund the likes of us out there.
Okay, so you're telling me right now that affordable credit, so 20 to 23% doesn't make sense,
It
and
doesn't
that's
make
what it
sense.
is right
It doesn't
now
make sense, yeah.
for folks who are in MSMEs or SMEs or individuals looking for credit to start a business. You're not doing anything if you're borrowing at 20 to 23%, and that's what the current rate is. So if I'm government, and let's say through a program, I give you 50,000 shillings to start a project, is that sustainable?
No. You see, now this is the other problem.
I'm just pretending like maybe there's a program somewhere
Yeah.
where people are given 50,000 shillings to start a business to become empowered.
50,000 shillings is good to give to people who are doing businesses that are not necessarily tax-paying businesses.
And which ones are those?
Yeah,
Is there a business you can do in Kenya that doesn't pay tax?
yes. If you choma mahindi somewhere,
Oh, okay.
you may not necessarily pay tax, because the systems to get you to pay tax are not that robust. Essentially, you're supposed to. But when I talk about SMEs, I'm talking about a business that will contribute to the exchequer.
Right.
So I am yet to see a serious business that you can do with 50,000 today that will contribute to the exchequer. Because the cost of even the startup alone, who are you? Is it the rent? Is it the salary? Is it? So at the end of the day, any serious business startup will still have to borrow, because you cannot start any business today. I don't know, maybe even 1 million shillings is still on the lower side. So most of the small businesses, they will go up to about 300,000 shillings. There's nobody with that money out there. And I'll tell you this, no. Kenyans out there, because of these hustles that you find people do, a person has been a hawker, a person has been alikuwa na choma mahindi, amekuwa mkulima. All those hustles takes people through a school of entrepreneurship that you not get in the formal training. So what I mean is, people can do business in this country. People, they have already inherent knowledge of doing business. So what they don't get is that capital. Most of them, they don't get that capital. Otherwise, people will do wonders. And you have seen small people who have gotten headwinds in terms of breakthroughs. They go ahead and create humongous companies in this country. And when you look at where they are coming from, they were probably hawkers. They were doing funny things out there. But because of those struggles, they developed the acumen to do business. So for me, people just need that capital and little formal training to arrange or put it in English what they have learned throughout their struggles, because that is what that's the orientation that businessmen have in this country. Very few of them, and I've told people so many times that in Kenya, very few people start businesses as a formal thing. Most of them, they start it as a way of survival. But when they are incentivized, they grow that to a conglomerate.
I have a question.
Yes.
I just Ikito Mafuta, the things I just want to understand here.
Yes, please.
Because we keep talking about fuel prices. So there's what I actually have. When I started, I normally, every time I fuel, I normally note down how much I fueled. And the other day I was just looking at my notes here. And this is, believe it or not, this is 2020 when I started noting this down. The year 2020, this was March. A litre of petrol was going at 112 shillings at the time. Full tank, around 77 litres, umelipa only 8,000. Today, that 8,000 ikama umenusa.
Unaangalia pump attendant vibaya.
I'm just looking at the way it started going up.
Yeah.
I want you to explain to me. So we have the base tax for fuel. Then we've got these layers and layers of hidden, not hidden, levies and fees. And I just need to understand, because it's still the biggest revenue earner. Excise duty ni ngapi? Percentage?
The
VAT ni ngapi?
16%.
Right? I just want you to explain to me. So we have VAT 16%. And then, where is this? Then I want to understand road maintenance levy.
Yeah.
Nyanini?
Road maintenance levy is ostensibly supposed to take care of roads. Literally. Is the fund that the government is supposed to use to maintain roads across the country.
So
These
when the
roads in
president
Kenya?
said,
Yes.
so when the president goes to a place and say, nitawajengea hii
Hii.
barabara.
Ni sisi.
Ni nitawajengea. Ni nani anajenga hiyo barabara? Hiyo pesa inatoka wapi?
Basically, you see, Dennis, and this is the truth. This is the truth.
Yes.
The government has no money of its own.
Yes.
All the money that the government has comes from the taxes. So whether it is a governor, whether it is an MP, whether it is a president doing roads.
But when he speaks,
It is
like he's
done.
doing you a favor, he's
Yeah.
actually helping and gifting you by building you a road.
Yes.
This money, the Kenyan in Lodwar, the one in Baringo, Samburu, Nairobi, we are all paying this
Yes.
levy.
Yes.
Meaning,
Whenever
road-
you see a pothole,
yes,
it cannot be repaired in any other way other than using that money. Meaning, you are the one who have literally repaired the road. And whenever you see that road with a pothole and it's not been repaired, the question should be, I've already paid for the repair. Why is it not done?
okay. Then there's petroleum development levy. What is this for?
Petroleum development levy is basically the 5 shillings and 40 cents we were talking about. That money is basically supposed to cushion mwananchi. But then again, as the name goes, development is supposed to develop systems and efficacies of delivery of petroleum in the country. So, but the most urgent need is usually to cushion the mwananchi from the shocks of the petroleum out there.
Okay. The petroleum regulatory levy.
Petroleum regulatory levy, I think is 0.75% of the shillings or something like that. Is the money that's supposed to fund EPRA.
To fund EPRA in what sense? Paying their salaries, rent, what funding EPRA in what?
For them to regulate the
Mathematics.
price.
For them to see it and regulate.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see, it's that regulatory body has its expenses. Yeah, so that is the contribution that petroleum does to the body.
Now the charges are per liter. Every time I'm going to pay, these
Petroleum charges and levies and costs, they are liter based.
So every time I go, I get a liter. So I've gone to get my 70 liters. Per liter, there is money being deducted to help EPRA continue working.
It's just like the way what you do with Kenya Power.
Okay.
You know, is that money that goes to Kenya Power.
Okay. Railway development levy.
Yeah. Railway development levy that's supposed to develop the railway.
It's supposed to, so every liter nakatwa, there's money that is supposed to do what?
Develop the railway.
To develop the railway.
Yes.
What are we developing? I may be speaking like a layman. I know we have SGR. So to expand the railway network, maintenance, what exactly does it do?
You see, now this is I don't know how to put this. When we have charges there, what that money does, I cannot authoritatively tell you that it is doing this. What I know is what it's supposed to do.
It's what's supposed to do.
Yes, it's
but
supposed to
being
develop railway.
deducted.
Yeah, it's supposed to
Okay.
develop railway, but as to whether it develops or not, I am, and maybe I would be seeing that
Yeah.
particular
Then
development.
very quickly, we have an anti-adulteration levy.
Yes, that I know. 18 shillings per litre of kerosene.
What does it do?
That is supposed to, that money, what it does today, it just goes to where these other taxes are put, but the reason for it was to make sure that they raise the prices of kerosene to avoid adulteration, because it was the reagent of adulteration. So when people are really doing adulteration of diesel and petrol, they used to put or add kerosene into it because it was very cheap. And so it was supposed to bring the prices to a certain level where there is now no incentives for adulteration.
So you have import declaration fee, you have
Yeah.
merchant shipping levy.
They all now come to what we are saying. You see, if you look at 80 shillings is what percentage of 185? It's about 80 or 90 percent. So, in other words, to answer your question, if today you are to drive in this country with fuel that has no taxes whatsoever, you would be buying it around 100 bob. 105 thereabout.
Oh, shillings.
Yeah.
Well,
So the other 80 shillings you add is for taxes.
it's a lot. And there's a lot to be done. And that's what it looks like in terms of what needs to happen to move an economy robustly. And oil fuel plays a big role there. Martin Chomba, chairman of the Petroleum Outlets Association of Kenya, has joined us in this conversation this morning. Martin, thanks as always for being here.
Thank you. It's always my pleasure.
Conversations continue at 9:01. Good morning.
News from around the world. 94.4 Spice FM. This is the Situation Room. The only way to start